So how do perceptions impact our mental health? Find out today on this episode of IncreMental Health Tips. Welcome to IncreMental Health Tips. My name is Jared, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Liz. Before we get into discussing perceptions and their impact on mental health, I would just ask that you please subscribe, and if you're enjoying our content, please like. It really helps get the word out on these really important issues. So today's topic is on perception, our own perceptions, and how they impact mental health. This can be a really important issue because, psychology tells us that we as humans have this tendency to want to confirm our own biases. So that if I think today is a bad day, for example, I'm just going to focus on and find all of the things that make today bad to confirm that disposition I have. So perceptions obviously play a really important role in that. But Liz, so what do you think? How do perceptions, what role do perceptions play in mental health?
Well, I think you bring up a very good point, because in couples counseling, you can have two people in a room and they both think I'm right and my point of view is the only valid one. And then the couples therapist has to figure out, well, what's going on here? What are the different perspectives? And what's going on that there's so much conflict? And a lot of times people agree 90% of the issue, they agree on it, but that last 10%, they're communicating in a way that just results in conflict and they can't resolve the issue. And so a couples therapist, you'll sit down, listen to the perspectives and try to understand what's going on here. And a lot of times it can just be the result of whether or not someone's perceiving what their partner's saying in a positive or negative way.
Well, right. Perceptions, it really goes down to our outlook, and, sometimes a third party like a therapist can really help us with the perceptions, but we don't always have the benefit of a therapist there. So what are some ways that, some of the negative ways this can play out in daily life? What are some examples?
So my supervisor would give a really great example of when he was first starting out. He did a presentation and he went up to his supervisor at the time, and his supervisor said, "Great job." And he perceived this as a negative thing, as if it was a patronizing comment that he must have done a poor job, and so his supervisor was trying to encourage him by saying "great job." But he recognizes now that most likely this was a positive comment, that he was genuinely trying to encourage him and give him a compliment on his work. But this is an example of how our perceptions can even distort a positive comment in a negative way.
Right. No, definitely. And as anybody in a relationship can attest, though, because sometimes our culture, we sometimes say things that we don't mean. If you're mad at somebody, anybody here in a relationship will know, and the other says, "It's fine, don't worry," that doesn't always mean it's fine and don't worry. So that doesn't help either. And it can sometimes fuel this whole suspicion that we have that maybe things are not they're meant how we think of them as being meant, rather than what the person might actually mean.
Well, I mean, this all has to do with perception, right? Is someone genuinely asking the question, or, are they playing some kind of angle? People every day, they say, "How are you?" And usually people just default to, "I'm fine." And, do you perceive the person as genuinely asking the question, whether it's a spouse saying what's wrong or whatever the situation may be? Does the person who's hearing it perceive it as a genuine question, or, do they think the person is just being polite?
So tone can play a role in that. because depending on your tone when you're speaking to somebody, that might sort of reinforce the wrong idea or an idea that you don't want. But we can't control other people's tone. We can control how we perceive, or we can try to recognize how we perceive things. So in terms of a strategy for dealing with this, we obviously have to, we talked about in cognitive distortions, about how our thoughts our feelings are not a really good indicator of reality, and neither are our thoughts. So we sometimes have to challenge our thoughts. And so along the same lines, we have to challenge our perceptions. So just thinking of some questions that we can ask ourselves to challenge our perceptions might be things like, well, if somebody expresses, for example, if somebody expresses an opinion we don't like, we can ask ourselves, well, how much value should we place on this opinion? Because placing too much value on someone else's opinion can just make us angry, and it doesn't matter if somebody doesn't like the clothing we're wearing or the work we did. Depending on who this person is, it may not matter their opinion. And so it's just a matter of, depending on how we perceive that and internalize that, if we're going to let that completely control our feelings for the day, or if we're just going to take it in context.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I've been trying to teach our son about. How much value do you want to place on a kid at school's opinion? People are going to give you negative comments, and if someone from his school says something negative, I'm trying to teach him not to value those comments, because no matter who you are in life, you're going to get a negative comment from someone, and very often the person who's saying that comment isn't someone you should pay attention to. And I do think it's different if someone's trying to give constructive feedback compared to someone who's just trying to be rude and make a negative comment. Those two things are different. So constructive comments, you want to try to understand if there is something you can improve on. But if someone's just being rude, and especially if it's someone you don't even know, I don't think you should be placing a high value on that comment.
Just one more aspect of that is sometimes we get upset by the things people don't say. And so that really also relates to perceptions, because if I show somebody something and they don't immediately have feedback for me, my mind can go wild with all of the implications of that. But really, we just shouldn't assume what people are thinking, especially in non-action or not saying something.
Well, I think part of it is that we just automatically make assumptions even when we're trying not to. And so this is why taking into consideration all the evidence that you know about someone else, like if your spouse is generally a good person, thinking about how they've treated you in the past and recognizing that, whatever's going on might not relate to that. Like if they've just transitioned to a new job and it's a lot more stress for them, their bad mood might be best explained by they're having a stressful day. It might have nothing to do with the marriage or current, with the relationship you have with the person. So recognizing how these things influence things and trying to give the benefit of a doubt to people, I think makes a big difference.
Well, and also to consider the other possibilities. Oftentimes we can have a poor interaction with someone, and we don't know what's going on with them at that time or that day. And I think especially today we have endless Zoom meetings with people, and we talk to them, and maybe they're not as personable as they always are, but you don't have to take that as a judgment on you. You can actually realize that, well, maybe there's other things going on, or maybe there's other things in their life that are impacting this. So considering the other possibilities is, really important, and considering everything from different points of view.
Yeah, and that's a skill that has to be developed. Nobody's going to be good at that right away. So learning how to consider different points of view is really important, and you can challenge yourself to think of, well, what's a view that I don't like, and why would somebody hold that view, and to really actually take the time to think it through and understand from that person's perspective why they hold a view that you disagree with. I think it's a really good exercise to learn how to consider different points of view. And I think as well, thinking about, can this perspective be interpreted in a more positive way than I'm considering it? So a lot of times we can think, oh, this person's angry at me, but it could just be that they're tired. So what's a more positive way of thinking through what are the dynamics of what's going on, instead of just assuming that there's a negative perception or negative interpretation to what's happening?
Well, absolutely. And giving people the benefit of the doubt and interpreting people's perspectives more positively is really extending them a certain amount of grace. Because oftentimes when we have poor interactions, that person may realize, that didn't come out the way I had intended. So by being gracious to them, it really can help people manage that. And you never know when just even graciously handling a bad interaction can really start turning someone's day around in a positive way.
Well, I think that's a good point, because you can also think through, how would a positive interpretation influence me? And when you start to think about that, you might start to realize how your perception really does have a large impact on the way you think and feel and react to a situation.
So we can't always change how we initially just feel when or think, or how we initially perceive things. So we're not suggesting that these questions help you in any way do that. If something just doesn't sound right to you, it's still not going to sound right to you. But the important thing is that you evaluate your perceptions, especially before you act on them. And so it's just important to keep these things in mind. So that's all the time we have for today. We thank you very much for joining us. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow us on Twitter at IncreMental Tips. Visit our website, www.IncrementalHealthTips.com, where we have more resources and we regularly post events. Until next time, thank you very much for joining us.